welcome to Culture Road, a show that discusses a number of contemporary issues from a cultural and ecological point of view. And how are you doing, Phil? Today, we have only the two of us. This is one of those times in the summer when things are down and we have to make do with what is available.
Right? Indeed. Yes, George. Well, here we go. Just be, mano a mano today, I guess.
You can see from where I am, it's not the usual place where I usually do my work. So with, the summer, a lot of things are happening, moving, and hopefully next week or the week after, we shall be back to normal and be in a better place than I am today. I think we can let it go. How are things going on, my friend?
Me, can't complain really. I mean, trying to stay cool after all, and kind of keep my head above water with various things. And it's funny, George, that when I look at the paper lately, it seems the last few days, and I say this in a good way. I'm spending less and less time reading the paper because. There actually is it's more like what you kind of expect of the summer, that kind of the news kind of slows down a bit. Last year, obviously, that was not the case. And we kind of but of course, everything was so crazy last year. So now it seems like it's more of a normal summer that we're just, cruising along here. I mean, not that nothing is happening, of course. Certainly in the world, things are happening. We hear about Haiti and Cuba, a few other things, but I would say that the in this country, it's kind of like I was turning it on looking at say the New York Times online a couple of days in a row, and it's like, okay, negotiations in Congress, and okay, new COVID variant, and okay, it's kind of a reassuring thing in a way. It's like another sign that kind of we really are approaching some degree of normalcy, when it's not like we have to stay glued to the TV or the computer all the time because we don't know what horrific thing is going to happen next. You know what I'm saying?
That's true. And actually, the funny thing is that we're now putting a lot of things into perspective and talking about staying cool and talking about the variants. Think of what is going on right now. Last year, we didn't hear so much about the heat wave along the west, from Oregon to California. And this year is just a bad situation coming from British Columbia to Northern California. Mm. And then, of course, the variants are not now a life and death situation, because we have come to learn how to live with it. So much that in the United States, at least, if you are, not to say that it's destroying families, but if you're getting it in a situation that could take your life away in the United States, it basically means that you have not been vaccinated. And the variant, which actually is true, it's very, very tough. It's a tough situation with the Delta variant. It's the latest news, of course, is that it's increasing. The spread is increasing in New York, in New York, which is interesting, but also mostly in the South and parts of the Midwest. And the data coming out of those states show that most of those who are getting it, almost 90% of them, are those who have not been vaccinated. Mm-hmm. Now, this is a big issue because it brings into question this divide that we have, which is not so much about health, not so much about politics, but so much about culture. A cultural divide that is having a lot of effects on just about every aspect of life. So that is an interesting thing, but at least we are able to put everything into perspective. We're able to determine the risks and analyze what are best ways to approach them. So there you go, the difference between this year and last year.
That is one thing, I agree with you. And it's the facts are the facts, that in the the regions that were most supportive of our former president, and have the greatest resistance to the vaccination because it comes from the government, and government, is considered, at least the federal government, kind of an entity of evil. You are seeing the biggest upticks in the disease. I mean, and what can you say at this point? I mean, it's easy for us to sit here and say, these people are idiots, these people are self-destructive. I can't, but it's more complicated than that, is what I'm trying to say, not to sound like an Eastern elitist or anything.
You're right. It's complicated. It's not only the fact that they are rejecting, medical science, basically, but they also have some beliefs that they hold so dear, beliefs that are driven by cultural attitudes. The last couple of weeks, 1 month, about 3 weeks, has been something that I've grown to learn a lot of things, and especially about COVID, and especially the Delta variant. So Delta variant is this type of the COVID that is coming, that was first detected in India. And what ended up happening is that it infected about 30 million Indians and killed about 400,000 of them before it leaped across the oceans and went to other parts of the world. And I'm very conversant with the situation in England and in throughout Africa that has been, has gone even worse. In many of those cases, what you get to see is that vaccination has not really reached a lot of people. In England, where you would expect more people to be vaccinated and is doing very well, a little bit well, what they did was to have 1 dose of the vaccine, and because they wanted it to reach a lot more people. They wanted to at least to cover a lot more people. The problem, of course, is that only helps you to, if the effective rate of that is nearly around 60% or something like that, 60 to 70%. So that's why it's having trouble there. But of course, people are not dying as much as they used to. Across Africa, where I'm very conversant with, a friend of mine, of course, just went back to Namibia, have had passed away because of this thing. And I went to their website, the website of the ministry, and just about every adult is dying. I saw people actually telling me that in the last 1 month, they've lost 12 members of their family to this variant. But that is, the reason is, in fact, even the president and the prime minister were, affected. But the reason is they don't have the vaccine. What they have is very little from the World Health Organization, and it cannot, help most of the people. Here in the United States, however, if you want it, you can get it. If you want the vaccine, you can get it. In New York, of course, as you know, what's going on is that you can just walk around the street, and they'll be trying to offer it to you along the streets if you want it.
Go into your neighborhood CVS, and there it is.
Yes, but we still have, in many places, we still have workers who have not been vaccinated.
Well, before we go any further, George, let us say hello to the third member of our troika, Angela Mosley. Hi, Angela.
Hi.
Hi, Angela.
How are you?
I didn't know you were going to be coming because I thought you were busy, but thank you so much.
I'm here. So the conversation seems interesting.
Yes. Well, so just to respond to you, George, I think what's clear is that there are different reasons, obviously, why people have not been vaccinated in different parts of the world or different communities. You mentioned India. Again, one factor is that when you have certain types of right-wing populist leaders like Narendra Modi, Jair Bolsonaro, Donald Trump, you have this atmosphere where They are obsessed with image above everything and about looking like, strong men who can control everything. And they convey this message to their followers. And in order to convey it, they have to downplay things that contradict this narrative, such as a pandemic that does not respect political beliefs. And so, therefore you have, and part of their narrative also was kind of a sense that don't trust the bureaucracy, the deep state, the official story about anything. Just listen to me. I have the answers. Or as Trump famously put it, I alone can fix it. Therefore, they cultivate skepticism and distrust of medical authorities, public health people like Dr. Fauci, who, may have changed their mind about a few things, but generally are on the right track and generally know what they are talking about because this is their profession. Then, of course, you have things like, as you say, Africa and other developing parts of the world, where the real issue is not that the government is so, incompetent or fascistic or whatever, but simply that they haven't been getting the vaccines. And that, of course, is the fault of the developed world. I know that, Joe Biden has recently tried to make more of an effort to get extra vaccines that we've accumulated here to those countries. But obviously, there's a lot more to go in that area. And it heightens the disparities that were already there between different parts of the world. And then, you mentioned New York. I mean, yeah, in this city, there are still communities who, for various reasons, often having to do with distrust of medical authorities because they've had a bad history with those authorities, are a little more reluctant to come forward and get it. So, you can't, basically, it's not a one-size-all situation. You have to focus on different strategies, so to speak, for different communities or different countries before we really totally get a handle on this thing.
Yeah. What we did yesterday, the White House invited Olivia Rodrigo.
I saw that.
Yeah.
There is a new profession called influencers, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to be one of them. Except
I know. Well, she apparently, is a musical performer. I mean, I don't think I'd heard of her before. I rely on my teenage kids to kind of keep me abreast on like who's the hot thing, and they haven't mentioned her. But on this news story that I saw, they showed a clip of her, I guess her latest video, where she's decked out in this cheerleader outfit, doing a lot of splits and whatever. And apparently, okay, people want to watch. But she seems like a nice young lady who can reach a large number of people. And okay, fine, use whatever tactic is available. I would say, sure.
Yes, Angela, don't we see a lot of this on TikTok?
Oh my God, yes, I think TikTok takes it to a whole nother level, but I think they're at this moment that because a lot of people are on varying spectrums of the thought of, should I get it, should I not get it? So they're basically kind of using whatever type of entity they can possibly do to make it happen. Because one video that I had seen, there is a rap group called Juvenile, and they took their words from a song back, I think it was like the early 2000s. They took that and changed it about telling people to go get the vaccine. So they're doing everything strategically possible to put it out there, go get the vaccine, saying, hey, look, this celebrity is doing it, this big time such and such is doing it, you should too. So yeah, they're pushing it.
Yeah. Actually, I think I read something today that was written by some professor of medicine at Harvard. He said that we have actually gotten out of this situation. In the United States, we have actually gotten out of this situation because we have vaccinated ourselves out of this situation, regardless of the fact that we have this new variant, which is rising in New York and maybe in the Midwest and in the South. But what is likely to happen is that you'll have, sickness, but not illness. You'll have incidents, but you probably will not have so much death as we had before. Mm-hmm. In the same way that we have so much of, flus and all those kind of things. Because let's face it, I don't think we're going to go back to the way we were before, whereby we didn't have this virus. This virus is going to be like just the flu, and you have to deal with it the way it comes.
I'm sorry, you think we're not going to go back to that point?
I'm thinking that in the sense that we will continue to have this virus as one of the health problems long term, so that it becomes just like a flu that we are aware of. We have to take that into consideration, but it's not like that we're going to wipe it off the surface of the earth. It's going to be difficult to do that.
Yeah, because I think that, like, even I was remembering, like, even when we were younger and before we had to even get into school, we had to get our shots and get vaccinations and stuff. So I think that's going to be just where it is with this particular thing.
Yes, measles and rubella and MMR.
Yeah, measles, mumps, rubella, correct. Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, that may be, not just the best outcome we can hope for, but really not such a bad outcome. I guess the danger here is kind of, I've been vaccinated, my family's been vaccinated, and it's easy for a lot of us maybe to get kind of into this, feel kind of apathetic about everyone else, or in some cases even, I mean, when I mentioned, people in, as you say, in the South and Midwest who aren't getting vaccinated for political reasons and kind of saying, well, you can go to hell any way you want to,
Right.
And I think we're not at the point, though, where we can have that kind of complacency about everybody else, because we live in such an interconnected world that we really can't, we can't sit back and say, well, I'm healthy, I'm not worried anymore, because it's kind of like this should be a wake-up call. I guess that's what I'm trying to say, because there probably will be other pandemics or other viruses down the road. Because think back to the decade before this virus, we already had Ebola, West Nile, SARS. Yeah. And in each case, I think that much of the Western world, the reaction was like, well, that's Africa. They always have these problems, yada, yada. We don't have to, as long as it doesn't come here. And, one or two health professionals, I remember, came here, they had been infected, and right away they were rushed into quarantine. And, that was the big story. Wow, don't let them, and they were treated, they were released, and that was the end of the story. Okay, I think we can't let that happen again. We have to really be aware of how these viruses spread, and come up with like global strategies so that they are isolated and the danger is reduced as quickly as possible. We know it will happen again. It's a question of how do we deal with it the next time. We didn't learn that lesson from SARS and West Nile. We have got to learn that lesson from COVID-19.
Yeah, I think you're so right on the head with that, Phil, because I think for a lot of us, we're so very far removed from the major hits, like, the Spanish flu and all of the big ones that took a lot of people down. And then when SARS and stuff happened, it wasn't immediately in our backyard. And when we had people that were, small population that were affected, like you said, they were quarantined and put off to the side and, then allowed to come out and connect again. But I think this one hit a little bit differently because it was a little more closer to home. And there were more people's immediate family members and friends who were dying and we couldn't connect. But I think you are so right. The fact that we should learn from this one, learn how, to strategically move it about, get the vaccines out there and keep it functioning. But I think it could be just the Western arrogance. And they're like, it happened and let's keep it moving on. I still don't think they got the gravity and effect of everything that is happened or has happened with this virus.
Yeah, although I must say that there are a lot of good things that have also come out of this. One is the collaboration that the government had with pharmaceutical companies to be able to repurpose. What is it called? This new way of making vaccines that was used by Pfizer and Moderna. Mm-hmm. This has been in the works for quite a while, and they were initially, like the couple that developed one for Pfizer, they were trying to get a vaccine for cancer. And so they had to repurpose it for COVID. And they're going back to that. Now, I do believe that this technique, this technology that has been so helpful in coming out with a vaccine within 1 year record time is going to be helpful in trying to deal with other situations. Like Angela, you talked about MMR and all those vaccines that we used to take to go to school, to be able to go to school, because the schools, of course, say that if you don't take them, if you don't show that you are immunized for certain kinds of diseases, that you are not going to get to school, which I do believe will happen with this one. A lot of schools are taking that step and saying you have to be vaccinated to do that. But I remember that for some of us, we still have, I don't know whether any of you have it, but I have this scar that came from vaccination for polio. We used to go to school and, they would just line up kids and students and just give them polio. And in many parts of Africa, they would go to marketplaces where there are so many people and they just vaccinate just about everybody there. So it took time. It took a long time. I think for polio, the last polio vaccine was administered in Nigeria 2 years ago. It was the last time that polio was defeated, so to speak, by the World Bank. The World Health Organization. And if you think about it, that's like a 50-year journey of dealing with one disease. Mm-hmm. And polio was one that you just didn't get it right away. And even if you got it right away, you are not going to be disabled right away. It took time, just like HIV situation took time as well. But this was so urgent and it required an urgent response, which occurred. So coming from this point of dealing with this urgent situation, and you have collaboration and you have technologies that are coming together, and a change of heart, a change of attitude from the West and from the business community and from governments. This is one model that can be applied and reapplied several times over going forward. The one thing that has been identified is the imbalance in terms of distribution of the drugs or the vaccine. And that's something that, with minds, a lot of minds coming together, they will have to deal with. I have no doubt about that.
Yeah. No, it's necessary. And I will say, George, I agree with you that this does warrant like a shout out to the pharmaceutical industry for their role here. I mean, they still charge way too much. They're still greedy. They still, waste a lot of their time and energy on, Viagra and other such kind of cosmetic, drugs rather than the ones that can really address the most serious problems. But in this case, they stepped up, they did their part, and, we have to be grateful for that. I think one other thing that, kind of needs to be mentioned here, I was thinking back to really the weekend in March when everything shut down. And I don't know whether they planned it in advance, but CNN, I remember it was a Sunday night, and that was the first night where I knew I wasn't going back into my office, my kids weren't going back into school, so forth. CNN ran a documentary that night about the intrusion of humanity on wildlife habitats, which clearly was identified early on as one possible reason, or really an underlying reason why we're seeing more of these viral epidemics in general. I mean, I know now there's all this back and forth about, well, what about the Wuhan lab and were the Chinese, plotting to develop it? Okay, be that as it may, okay, in general, it is clear that by encroaching on wildlife habitats and having more contact with various kinds of wildlife species, we have increased, the likelihood of this kind of viral spread. And so it's really, in other words, it's tied into overdevelopment and environmental damage. And I hope this is another thing. I haven't heard enough of this, in recent months, but what I've read, I mean, from people, from environmentalists and public health people, is that this is part of the problem. And I think that's another lesson that I don't know if the world is going to learn, but I hope at least voices continue to be raised about this, that this should be a wake-up call about slowing down the pace of development and increasing the pace of preservation of wildlife areas, and just kind of saying, hey, there should be limits to how far we encroach on places like the Everglades or, around the world, places that are habitats of animals that really, it's better that we don't visit them at all or have as minimal contact as possible.
Yeah, oh my God, I think you said a mouthful with that, Phil, because that was also for me something that had been coming to mind. And I know a lot of people feel their different ways about the environment, the climate warming and all of that. But also we need to pay attention with areas that have been glossed over or, heavily under a lot of snow. With all the melting, different bacteria are now coming out into the environment that we were not used to, or that were not, within our, particularly different century or time periods and stuff like that, that is going to come at our bodies a little bit differently. So you are very right in talking about just a lot of things that are happening, and it's affecting basically a ripple effect that is allowing other things to take part and come about. But I don't think that a lot of people is paying attention to that, because they're just like, oh, it's so far removed, or no, it's not. But you're very, very right on that, right on the money with that one.
I couldn't say it any better. What you two have said is something that we are going to focus on going forward a lot more. This balance, these risks, this space between the environment and health, and the link between them, not just environment and health, but also human activity, economic activity, and all those kind of things is very, very important. Of course, you're aware of what is going on in Canada and in British Columbia, where this little town called Lytton, and this town had a 121 degree Fahrenheit of scorching heat. And a lot of people died, 165 one night. A little town almost nearly wiped off the surface of the earth. Wow. I mean, the government was trying to get to evacuate the whole town. Mm-hmm. And that went all the way down to Oregon. It was so bad. It was so bad. Just in recent days, recent 2 weeks ago. And this is going to be very normal, a normal occurrence in many, many areas because of climate change, because of climate risks, and because of the problems that, some of us have not attuned ourselves to. We don't even have to go to what's going on in the Amazon.
Right.
In this country, you are very, very right, that there are certain parts of this country that the environmental industry, and I would call them industry because they've become so professionalized, they're very elite, that there are certain parts of the country that are not even looked at. So they are ignored, they are neglected. Cities particularly, you may think that cities are doing very well. They're not. If you come to New York, there are no green spaces available for kids to run around. And if we know that we get a lot of air from trees and from vegetation, and in this city, for example, it's a concrete jungle. It's a concrete jungle, and so there are health risks that we have to attune ourselves to, that we have to be aware of, that are going to be coming, which we may not even be able to deal with fully. As you saw, there was an interesting article that came out yesterday, actually a report from the CDC, that in the days of COVID, we had an exponential increase in drug overdose. Because people are just indoors, for example, in the cities. So we're going to have to step up and do something about protecting our own environment, whether we're in the cities or in the rural areas or in the suburbs. I think that's key. That's key. Just to let you know, I am actually working on some ways to make sure that we as a show do our part to discuss and to partake in efforts to rescue our environment, to help in expansion of urban green spaces over here in New York and perhaps in Chicago and DC. I'm going to be aligning with somebody, or rather collaborating with somebody, so that we can fight the oil industry's appetite for oil. There is one thing going on right now in Okavango Delta. Okavango Delta is in Botswana and Namibia and Angola, and that is the world's only inland delta. And they're trying to drill oil. I spent 20 years covering oil, and that is one of the worst things that could ever have happened.
This is in Africa, George?
Yes, Okavango is in Southern Africa.
Wow.
It's amazingly, it has culture. It has a lot of bird life. It has animal life. It has marine life that have never been found anywhere in the world.
Oh, wow.
It is, most deltas. So most deltas are close to the sea because the river goes down and splinters into distributaries as they go into the waters, right? As they pour their waters into the ocean, right? Mm-hmm. This is different. This is, instead of going to the Atlantic, these two or three rivers, they're going inland, creating a huge wetland covering 3 countries.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I know I've talked about a lot about urban environment, but also wetlands, and we're doing a lot. Do more.
Absolutely. No, I think again the urgency of this issue can't be overstated. Even before the pandemic has hit it home. I mean, it's hit home a number of issues that the world needed to do more of, and has not: inequality, racism, you name it. But the environment, I mean, that's like, because after all, that is existential in every degree. And the thing is that, I don't come here to try to demonize all conservatives, but the fact remains that, again, when you have, 2 of the largest countries in the world with extreme right-wing governments, Brazil and India, this is another thing. I mean, before the pandemic hit, Bolsonaro was talking about, more development in the Amazon, and that, he didn't give a damn about the Indians, the indigenous people who live there, because, as he put it, they don't speak our language. They don't speak Portuguese, so who cares, And bringing it back to this country, it always bothered me that of all the, evils of Trump's presidency, there was very little attention paid to his assaults on the environment. I mean, yeah, you'd see a story in the Times about appointing another guy to the EPA who was formerly a fossil fuel lobbyist and all that. But really, I mean, this is a reason why I think it's very, very dangerous to return Republicans to power in any way, because there was another story recently about how, some younger Republican office holders are finally beginning to acknowledge that global warming is a problem. Wow. Oh, gee,
welcome to the party.
I know. If the majority of the party still takes it as their official dogma that it's not a problem, when you have Mike Pence in the vice presidential debate last year talking about radical environmentalists, I mean, this is a scary, scary thing. If these people get in power again, you're going to see what you saw in the previous 4 years. You're going to see lobbyists in charge of the environmental agencies. You'll see cuts to environmental enforcement. You'll see opening up more areas to development. This is a threat. This is a bigger threat than anything I can think of. And I think people need to be aware of that when they go to the polls. And if the Democrats had any sense, they would hammer this home again and again and again.
Yeah. And I think that even with the statement and making the connections that, people do see, with the global warming and the environmental stuff that's happening, even like the recent thing that happened in Mexico and the pictures that are coming out with that gas leak and all the stuff that's happening. It is affecting just everything around us, and the fact that they want to keep building, keep drilling, and keep, hammering all this stuff with, like, there are no green spaces that you can see readily within the United States of America. You have to go far and wide to find some green spaces, like in the city areas. George, like you were saying, there are no gardens, no parks or anything like that, because everybody wants to live on top of each other because it's convenient to, live right there. Yes, I understand that. But if we are getting rid of all the green spaces, if we're getting rid of, the things that actually bring us life, we're not going to have life anymore. So it's going to be a problem. And no one is making these connections. It's not. So now you have the competition between the billionaires who are now trying to go to space, and they're going to tear space up. Like, okay, so you couldn't even get it right down here. Now you want to go tear space up? Yeah.
That's interesting. I'm a little bit concerned because during Trump, at least there was a boogeyman. Trump acted as a boogeyman. There was somebody you could blame. And there was somebody who was doing things so unprofessionally that you knew that it wouldn't succeed. And he was incompetent as well. And he hired incompetent people most of the time. And so he did his best to run the country down in all aspects, including on the environmental front. But it wasn't successful so much just because he was not good at the job he did. Think about this. The guys who have adopted his religion, Cotton, Senator Cotton, the other one from Missouri. Exactly. And Pence, and all of these people, and this new idea that you have to be like Trump without his
excesses, negatives, whatever. Yeah.
Exactly. So that these guys can be able to hoodwink just a lot of people, could actually be elected, and then do a lot more damage than Trump would ever have done. And without a lot more people understanding what is going on or seeing what is going on, because he was just outside of how we are supposed to act as normal people. So you have somebody who is normal, who is acting well, who is able to speak the language of progressives, but also is doing damage physically. That's going to be very difficult to deal with. Really difficult to deal with. And all the money people, the billionaires, of course, will always support anybody who is ready to give them a break on their taxes.
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, Bezos and Richard Branson can go to space.
And Musk.
The problem.
Don't forget Musk. Musk will be upset.
The problem we have is actually in this world. Because before you go there, you really have to make sure that you rescue this world, because this is where most of the people are. I mean, going to space you're not going to get somebody to serve you there. You're not going to get an hotel or a servant. They will still have to come back over here, and live with us.
I guess so. Yeah. Yeah, I know. I mean, it's like, is this a prelude to trying to colonize Mars? Well, I mean, why don't we try to fix things down here so that we don't have to live the way we would live on Mars if we were living there now, which is like putting plastic bubbles around everything because you can't breathe the air because there is no atmosphere as
right.
we know, right?
Yeah.
Leave Mars for a bit down the road, but let's try to get as much out of this humble little planet as we can.
In fact, Branson has an island to himself in the Caribbean. Why can't he make that island much better? These guys have islands, small islands in the Caribbean, where they're not laws, there are no rules, they're able to do whatever they want.
Right.
They're not satisfied with that.
Yeah. Well, this is the problem when you have since all these gentlemen, Branson, I mean, he's British, but basically they all made a lot of money in this country which allows them to get away with it, which allows them, I mean, this is opening up a whole nother topic, but the fact of the tax laws and the structure that allows people to make and keep as much as they can with no limits whatsoever, because putting limits is somehow, anti-capitalist, anti-freedom, anti-American, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that's one more thing that I think needs to be looked at in the light of what we've been through the last year and a half, and I should add, again, this is something where Biden and his people are making a stab at that. A couple of days ago, we heard about them reviving the antitrust, anti-monopoly initiatives that had really not been used by Republican or Democratic administrations for years. And this was his acknowledgement that, listen, we're getting to be in a situation similar to what we had in the 20th century, in the late 19th century, where there was just too much economic power concentrated in too few hands. So hopefully we do more of that as well.
Yeah.
What do you guys think about this opioid situation? 30% increase last year to 93,000. So basically, opioid is a problem that mostly affects people in the suburbs, but also it is becoming a problem for city folks. Is that not right?
I don't know. I mean, what I heard was that there was a serious jump in overdoses. Okay, when I think overdose, I think heroin, but I imagine that opioids, meth, and also, I mean, I think it's all connected, basically.
Fentanyl. I think fentanyl was the highest. Fentanyl and heroin, and then meth and cocaine later follow along that line.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that ties into the other phenomena of what's been called deaths of despair, which tend to happen more in these rural communities out in the heartlands. And what do we mean by despair? We mean that there are generations of more and more families, particularly the men, particularly white men, who suddenly have seen their standard of living plummet. The jobs that they used to be able to get, that their fathers and grandfathers could get, mostly in manufacturing, are no longer there. And then you factor in the isolation caused by the pandemic, and it's not surprising that this has happened. I would say the question is, again, what are we going to do to address it now that we're getting back to some degree of normalcy?
Yeah,
I don't have a simple answer for that.
I don't think there is a simple answer to that. I think that it's a very compounded issue, because it affects so many other things. And, feel like you said, the population that is, being affected by it, the men who are used to a certain role, and that's changed, and are, unable to take care of their families, unable to do a host of other things, whether, it's even talking about what they're feeling. So it's so many other issues that are compounded upon that. And then the pandemic kind of just, blew everything up, because you had to be stuck at home with, your family, and that made you sit and have to deal with the situation and deal with the, the pressures of, I can't provide for my family, I can't do this or X, Y, and Z. But I think all of this, leads to the rise in the deaths, or even just, the folks that are now taking it. But I think it goes a great deal to something that we don't like to talk about in the States, or just, in a society period, is spousal depression, mental health, all of that. We don't want to deal with that, because society told us that we had to be a certain way. We had to have a certain job and you'll be successful. You have to dress a certain way and you'll be successful. But when the real reality of it, that when people do, buy into that and it doesn't happen for them, they become depressed. They get down and like, okay, what's wrong with me? Why is this not happening? So mental health is a top thing that needs to be talked about. And, more people are starting to deal with it. But then you also still have people, and I don't want to say the older generation, because they like, just take it and, just grit your teeth and keep going with it. But when you don't talk about the issues and challenges that are affecting your life, and you keep adding it on to everything, you're going to explode eventually. You're going to do something outside of the quote unquote norm that you're used to, and that is not going to be good for you or even your extended family members.
Yeah,
Fantastic.
no, those are very good points, Angela. I mean, I agree. I think that there is still, even after all the research and all the, celebrities and whatnot, people talking about issues, mental health issues more openly, there is still a stigma about that, I think, where people still are reluctant to say that, they're in therapy or whatever, or that they've had issues of that nature. And I think you're also right about saying that we still have this kind of ethic of success in this country, or the American dream, that, you can do it for yourself. And if you don't, then it's your fault, not the system's fault. It's interesting historically, because one of the major challenges that FDR faced when he was tackling the Depression was that there was I'd say even more of this overriding sentiment in America that you were like, there was something wrong with you if you accepted government help, because it was on you. It was your fault that you were out of work. Yeah. And he had to work hard to kind of change that way of thinking and say, no, you didn't fail. The system failed you. And that's why we have to fix the system. Yes. And I think we have to, again, kind of reemphasize that again today, because that's what happens.
That's interesting, because it reminds me, I know this is a totally separate, but it works together. What both of you are talked about is this culture, the culture of what in critical theory we'll call it the culture of performativity or performance, whereby our life is all about performance. The society, as you say, Phil, expects me to be like this. So I have to perform to the expectations of the society, regardless of how I feel or what is good. And because we expect people to be a certain way, and they don't meet that, and a lot of people don't meet that, not only are they people with mental health, but even if the mental health is a very small part of it, the idea of not performing creates even more problems for them and leads them to this dangerous road where they have to take opiate to basically make it through the day, just so that you don't, you can forget what is going on all around you. So mental health is one that is coming so much as a result, not entirely as a result, but partly as a result of this culture of performativity. We have to perform toward the society. And let me tell you, it is a very hard thing. This is, of all the diseases, and I know a lot of diseases are so hard to deal with, mental health is very, very difficult, even for family members. Every time you go out in the street and you see somebody out there, as human beings, you're very social, we're anthropological. We don't want our members of our family to go out. When somebody is at that stage where they're out, where the family is not doing anything, or we think the family is not doing anything, the truth is the family has tried and has failed. And they have failed because this disease is not visible, but it's very difficult to change human psychology. Yeah. It takes a lot of effort to do that. And when they do that, it changes somebody forever.
Yeah. Very true.
It's very true. I think that because one thing that comes to mind that also is not talked about enough within the states, particularly with mental health, but a lot of, for example, a lot of our men and women who fight for this country and then they come back to this country and they're unable to get resources, their homes are put up for sale, and they're also dealing with the damage that the war has caused and all the things that they have seen, and they don't talk about it because they're not allowed to talk about it. They're not with some of the issues, and not issues, but with some of the missions that they have that were very, very classified and stuff, they are not allowed to talk about it. So they sit in themselves and they can't do anything. And that is affecting a lot of things. And it really hurts my heart. Like when you're walking down the street and you see military veterans or who are homeless and stuff like that, that makes no sense. And then, so let's now get to the people that have resources or that are, have homes and stuff and are battling mental health issues and are battling these situations. But because society tells them that you have to perform a certain way or you have to look a certain way, and when they're not doing that, there's nobody that they can talk to. There's nobody that's going to understand, especially if it's a family thing. Like, because I remember when I was working at a university and had to go out recruiting, and I was particularly looking at this young woman from an Asian family. She was told she was supposed to be a doctor. She was told that that's what she had to do. She didn't want to do that. And the more that I continued to counsel her and talk to her, her grades were failing and so much happened. But she was like, I'm under so much pressure from my family to be a doctor.
That's true.
And the fact is, we just do not allow people to grow into themselves and be who they choose to be. We tell them what you need to be, how you need to dress. We put all these restrictions on them. And when they don't live up to those requirements or the stipulations that we put on them, and when they become depressed and start taking opiates, or if they become start drinking a lot, we say something is wrong with them. Right. But we don't want to look at society and reverse and say, no, something's wrong with society.
Mm-hmm. Expectations. It's even harder. It's important that you mentioned the military and the veterans. I have a son who is now a veteran, has been in the Army and is now in the National Guard. And what I learned out of that process was that the Army does not allow people to talk. Yes, because of some of those missions are critical and are supposed to be secret, but also for the soldiers to make any mark, for the soldiers to be promoted or to be allowed to continue. They are supposed to be acting basically like property of the United States government. And they are not supposed to say anything that is wrong with them, because if you say anything that is wrong with you, then you are weak. You're
representing the government, yeah.
So if you're considered weak, it happens throughout our work system. If you go to a company where the company typically reflects the leader, if you find a leader who is good, the company reflects their values.
Yeah.
If you find a company where the leader, the manager is horrible, it reflects their values. Now, I'm not saying that the Army is horrible. The Army is very good, but I think the value system is still very archaic. It's still very tied to the past. Whereby, I have to say that they're trying to do a better job of it. Go ahead.
Yeah.
No, I was going to say, yeah. I mean, there are, I think, initiatives, mental health related initiatives. They're trying to do a better job, but yeah, they're up against this kind of warrior culture going back to ancient Greece, Sparta, that says that, you're a soldier, you suck it up, you fight and all that. And I think, interestingly enough, because this is something that impacts many other sectors of society. As you say, George, the business world, certainly the world of professional sports. And what's interesting, what we're seeing in sports lately is the women, once again, leading the way. You heard about Naomi Osaka, I believe it was, saying, I've got to take a little break here for the sake of my mental health.
Yes.
Wow. That's like a revolutionary thing to say. And so
never been said before. Never been said.
Right. So it had to be a female athlete who said it first, because I think a lot of the male athletes are still into this kind of, straitjacket of, hey, I'm a tough guy, I keep it to myself and yada, yada. And it does not work. So I hope we see more of that from both male and female athletes, because they're such role models. I mean, if like somebody like, Aaron Judge of the Yankees, I'm a big Yankee fan. Come out and said, guys, I mean, I'm taking, all right, maybe not during the season, but like maybe after the season, saying like, please, I need to get away from all this. I don't even want to think about baseball because, the pressure, you guys can't believe what the pressure is like.
Yeah.
There'd be a lot of pushback like, oh, he's a wimp, he's this and that. But, if we just see more of that across the board, I think that'll really bring about maybe some cultural sea changes here that might impact other areas as well. But, we'll see.
I think that's going to happen. Well,
Yeah.
This has been one of the best, impromptu discussions we've had, ranging from different kinds of health, mental to environmental to viral. And I think next week will be good. So don't forget to subscribe, to like us, and also to download our podcast. Until next 2 weeks from now, we shall see. Thank you so much.